So in today's Moodle, if you'll go on to it, the main thing you're going to download, there's a website's zip file. In this one, there are 3 different websites inside of it. Let's see, I downloaded it somewhere. There we are. You've got site 1, 2, and 3. And these are going to be your 3 different exercises and the project for today. And also I'm going to give you a main project that we'll continue working on for next week. So for website 1, so sample site 1, if you were to build a website in Photoshop, the main reason you would want to do this is just to create a mock-up. This would be something if you're working with a client, they come to you and said, hey, I need a new website, can you show me what it would look like? You can very, very quickly show them the basic idea of a website layout in Photoshop. Everything can have its own layer, so if you need to go in and quickly change out text, change out images, you can do that on the fly rather than having to recode everything. The best thing about working in Photoshop is you don't need to know the code in order to make it look good. Once you do build the website, however, there are some things that you need to keep in mind. But for this one, this is simply seen as a mock-up of a website, even though what we create can be technically fully functional. To do this, to create a mock-up of a website, what we need to do is to slice up your website into various different images so that it can load up. How many of y'all know some basic HTML? If I said you had to build a table, do you know what I'm talking about? Alright, we got the one person who's taking the website class. This is what a table is in a website. Whenever you go to a website, let's say I'm going to pull up Firefox and see what we have. So if you're looking at Facebook, Facebook by itself is in a grid-like structure. Everything inside of it can be kind of broken down into different sections. So Facebook, you go to the main page, the left side is one column of stuff and everything is inside of that left column. You've got a middle column and a right column. And everything has a certain width to it. Everything has a certain size and a certain placement within that grid structure. Amazon, very, very gridded out. So if I go to Amazon, no matter what page I'm on, they all look consistent because I know I'm going to find the Amazon logo, top right-hand side. There's going to be a header to it. There's going to be some middle body page, and then if I scroll down, all the different items are going to be spaced out evenly, same size, same structure in the grid for it. YouTube is another great example. Very, very gridded. If I go to every YouTube page, I know it's going to look consistent because they're using that template format where it's all gridded out like this. I took a screenshot of YouTube. Let me show you what I mean by seeing the grid of it. So here's the YouTube page in itself. If I was to divide it up, I know there's a header at the top of it. I know I've got a main body page, and in this case, each little video is kind of in its own separate cell. So if I turned on the grid, this is what the grid would look like. And it's broken up into this one big cell-like structure. In HTML, this is called a table. Whenever you develop out a website and you want to make sure everything is placed in a specific spot on a web page, you can do it by developing a table. Now this is kind of an old school way of doing it. They no longer do it this way. They use, what do they use now, Denny?
Yeah, they would use Dreamweaver and you'd have to figure out how to divide it.
Okay, divide it. The structure they call it now is called a div tab for divided up for that way. This is just an old way of doing it that creates a table, and inside this table you would divide up the rows and the columns into the areas that you needed. In Photoshop, once it's divided up, you place the image within this grid so you can show where everything's at. One of the upsides to working this way is if you need to change something out, rather than changing out the entire website design, all you do is change out whatever is inside of that area of the table, and then you can move on from that way. So that's kind of the basic flyover of using tables and working in tables. Photoshop's going to do all the coding for you, so we're actually going to build an entire website without having to write a single line of code. But here's how you can do it. The first one you'll download, let's go and jump back into Photoshop, is the sample site 1 Photoshop document. There are 3 Photoshop documents. I went ahead and saved you the time of creating them. By the way, if you ever make a website, go into File and New, the main document setup under Presets, there's some predefined. Here we are, under Web. These are some predefined sizes, 800 by 600, several thousand by several thousand pixels. These are usually measured in pixels. Most modern websites are over 1,000 1,000 pixels, upwards of 1,600 pixels. So if you're going to make a website, try to stay in the higher range by itself and within those proportions. I'll hit cancel. This particular one, if you want to find out its size, you can always go to image size. I kept it at 800 pixels wide just to keep the file size pretty low. But it looks like a normal website you would normally have. You've got a header, you've got a kind of a upper body page, and then you've got all your main content down at the bottom. To slice this up into a table format, the tool that we normally use is called the slice tool. You can find it in the upper left-hand corner of your toolbox. It's usually hiding under the crop tool. There's another tool that's associated with it we're going to use as the slice selection tool. With these two tools, it'll allow you to break up your image into different areas. Here's the first thing you need to do before you slice it up. Since this is divided very heavily into horizontal selections, I'm going to pull out some guidelines that kind of give me an idea of where one slice begins and one slice should end. So I'm going to click on the ruler, drag it down until it gets right about there. So this would be one area. I'll back it up and do the other area. Down at the bottom. I also know that each one of these is going to be a button that I click on. So when you divide up your slices, another thing to think about is what are things you're going to interact with. If it's a button, it needs to have its own image by itself. If it's something that's a movable image or animated GIF that we created, you're going to have to create slices for them as well. So I'm going to drag one more guideline for each of the buttons. So there's one there. I think there's some down here at the bottom. So each one of these I want to be able to say click on as well. So I'll quickly guide those out. It's an about side down at the bottom. Fantastic. So now all I've done is just created horizontal guides throughout my entire document. With my slice tool selected, look up in the content box at the very top. One of the options you can choose is slice from guides. It's going to look at the guides that you've created. It'll actually look at vertical ones if you had them too. And go ahead and cut up your image into different slices. So here we go. I'm going to click this. As soon as I do, you'll get these blue bounding boxes with numbers, usually at the top left-hand corner of each slice. This is what your HTML is going to look for. Actually, if I go into Save for Web, I also have each little slice. It's numbered off. I'm going to hit Preview, and this is going to open up in my default web browser, case Firefox. And so now I've opened up my document in Firefox. I can click on any one of these images, and now see, here's one slice, here's the other slice, here's the other slice. In other words, it's cut up my image into a table. If you keep scrolling down, you can see the HTML code that it generated, all to create and place in those images within the table itself. Just to kind of give you an overview of what you're looking for. In an HTML file, everything that you create is within the body. So here's the body of your website. Here's the table that you created. The TR stands for a table row, and the table divisions, so every row is going to be divided up into different divisions. And here's all the images that we've placed inside of it. We'll come back here once we start creating links within a page. But just so you know, it does generate the HTML for it as well. So let's actually make a button for each individual one from here. I've already divided up, going back into Photoshop, I'll hit cancel, into horizontal slices. With my slice tool, I can go in and individually select an area to make a slice from it. Simple as clicking and dragging. Since I have guides created, so now there's a third slice that's created, and it'll automatically renumber them in order as necessary. If you hover over it, you can always change up the size and dimensions of a slice. I'm just going to click over and create a sliced up button for each one of these. And a final one, say for contact. Same thing can happen for each of my buttons down at the bottom. Click and drag over it. If I need to resize it, I'll size it up that way. It's kind of a best practice if you're going to slice up a HTML mockup, use as few slices as possible. So in other words, I want one slice to be butted up next to the other one. If I skip over a little bit, say I had this space in between it, well, it's going to create a small slice in between here. Notice that there's number 15 is in between number 16. That's just kind of dead space. It's not necessary for that one. It's much better just to go ahead and put two slices next to each other so you have one fewer slice that you have to deal with. Go ahead and slice up the bottom one. And I'm not going to worry about the buttons down at the bottom. Y'all kind of get the idea. Once I've gridded this off, you can see now it's starting to look like that grid-like structure that I was telling you. Go back to File, Save for Web. Remember, in Save for Web, you can also tell what file format you want to save these at. We learned this last time. In our case, GIF was the last one that was chosen. If you want to choose a slice, you've got a Slice Selector tool here. You can click and drag over. In this case, I've selected all of them, or you can select individual slices that you want to change up. Let's select them all. I'm going to change them from GIF images to JPEGs. Now I can preview it out. Looks exactly the way it should look. I can pull off any one of these and they're going to be saved as images by themselves. So I'll go back in here. When I hit save, it's going to give me my save dialog box. This is the most important thing. I'm going to save this to the desktop. If you were just saving a general image for the web, you would want your format to be images only. In our case, we want to save an entire website. We want this to be an actual working mock-up. So we want to save the HTML and the images. We've got HTML also as an option. Some other default settings, if you're working in XHTML or if you're working with something else or just creating a background, you can change it up. For what we're doing, we're just going to keep this at default. We want to make sure all the slices are going to be selected. And we'll call this one, let's see, sample site 1 HTML. You can give it a name if you want to, and hit save. And I'm going to replace that one that I already had. Alright, so I've got it saved to my desktop. If we go to our desktop, there's two files that should be there. There should be, let's see, where is it? There it is. A sample site HTML file and also an images file that's associated with it. The HTML file, this is your actual HTML file that you could put on the internet and have as a working website. The images folder, if I open it up, if it decides to open up, these are all the images already pre-sliced up and saved as individual JPEGs. So in our case, here's the top one, the middle, here's the About button, here's the Services button. All the buttons are pre-saved as their individual smaller components of the entire website. Pretty cool. Any questions about that? So that's the basics of creating just a simple mock-up website in Photoshop, slicing it up, and saving all the images that are associated with it. Now, if you work with a web developer, they can take these and use what's appropriate. They can rebuild the website as needed. Like I said, you don't really build a website in Photoshop. But if I have this HTML file, double-click it, it'll still open up, and it's pulling these images from that images folder. Make sure the images folder is saved along with the HTML file. If for whatever reason, let's see, I'll go back to it. I say take out, I'm going to take out the top image, this first image, and just place it somewhere else. So I've taken it out of the images folder. If I refresh it, that image is going to be gone from my HTML file. It's got a broken link, it's trying to find it. So make sure they're all saved in the same images folder for that. Next thing you can do with creating a website, I'll delete these. For sample site 2, for this exercise, you're going to do the same thing, but for this one, we're actually going to create links from the slices that you've created. I've gone ahead and sliced it up, and in this website that you'll open up, there are a home button, about button, services, contacts. They're at the top, they're at the side, and they're also down here at the bottom. What we want to do is, if you create a slice from an image, you want to be able to link it to something. To do this, we're going to use our slice selection tool. So slice selector. With this one, you can click on and select any slice that you want. You know it's selected because it's highlighted in orange. With this one selected, we're going to go back up to the top. This icon will open your slice options dialog box. With the slice options open and with that one selected, you can change up and give customization to any particular area of the website. In this case, you can give it a specific name. So if I wanted to call this one Home Button 1, make sure there's no spaces inside of it. It'll be named Home Button 1. You can assign it a specific URL. And so for this exercise, what I want you to do is the URL has to be the full URL. So it has to start off http://www. I believe I'm saying your name, so benivy.com/ in this case home, because that's the name of the button that's going to be associated with it, going to this URL web address. The target in HTML, if you wanted something to just go to another page, you would leave this blank. If you want, say, another window browser to open up, you can type in _blank, and this will open up a new blank window, and it'll link to it that way. But if you leave this with nothing in it, it'll just go straight to the next page, and then you can back up from there. Message text, this is another thing that's kind of outdated, but if you wanted your web browser has a status bar down at the bottom to have a message inside of it, this is where you would type it out. I've never really used it, never found a use for it. Alternate text, however, is very useful. If someone's browsing the internet and you can turn off your images, so this kind of gives it a faster way of browsing, instead of loading up an image, it's going to load up an alternate text inside of that area. So for this one, if I typed in Home Button, the words Home Button would load up inside that text area rather than the image itself. This is also important for anyone who's visually impaired that's on the internet. There are some people that if they can't see and they're on a computer, they have a braille reader located out usually next to their keyboard. Rather than reading the text, they can actually feel the text and they'll see, okay, this is a button. They can read Home Button and they'll know to click there to work from it. You can also see the dimensions of your text from there. I'll just go ahead and say okay to this one. I'll do the same thing for the About button. So I've chosen it, open it up. I'm just going to give it a URL, http. And this one's going to be called About Us. And I'll just say okay for this one. You'll do the same thing for all of the buttons that are on this particular website. I'm not going to worry about the images and all the other stuff. But when you go to File and Save for Web, we'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and hit Preview. Now with this one selected, if I hover over it, it becomes an active link that I can click on. So when I click on this, benivy.com, well, the page doesn't necessarily exist, but it's actually taking me to another web page by itself. If I had, say, a Facebook icon that I wanted people to link to my Facebook or my blog or Twitter page, you can link to those particular pages as well. All this is done from the slice options that you're working with.
What does it do if you hit service or contact?
Service or contact, since I didn't type in a URL, it's not doing anything. It's just loading it up as an image.
All right.
It only links if you type in the correct URL from there. Good question. Same thing. I'll hit cancel. So that's what you're going to do for this particular exercise. For the first project, sample site 3 is actually going to be a project, and this one's going to be due next Tuesday. As with the other ones, I want you to slice each one up, make links to the home, setup, sitemap. This one is going to have 3 different GIFs that I want you to create and place inside of this website. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see, we've got it. I'll close that one out. And save this one for web. Need to be sure to select all of them. Come on, back up, there we go. Select all of them, save them as a JPEG. Since they're all now JPEGs, I can click on just this GIF or any of the GIF images and save those not as JPEGs, but as the GIF that we're supposed to create from them. From these, we're going to create an animated GIF. And I'll go quickly to show that. So convert, so GIF 3, all to GIFs. So now when I save it, make sure HTML and images are saved. I can close this one down. Here's my HTML file. Here's my images file. If I open up my images, I've got all my images saved up. Notice that they're all JPEGs except for, here's my GIF that I created, here's the other GIF, and here's the other GIF. Associated with this website, under Site 3, there's 3 different GIF files. What I want you to do is to create a tween animation that links between these 4 different images. And so this first one, they're selling flowers, so it's going to show flowers, and then fade between one and the other. We learned how to do this last class period, so you load it up. Actually, I've already got one created, so hope I had it created. I think I saved it to the desktop and closed it out. Uh-oh. There it is. Nope. Oh well, I didn't save it. But what you would do is go into your images folder, find the GIF that you're going to replace. So in this case, GIF 1, open it up into Photoshop. With this one, you need to open up your timeline, window, timeline. Now with this one selected, if you need to create a frame animation, it's going to be blocked out. The reason why it's blocked out is because a GIF, remember, is saving it as a different image file format. GIFs are saved under an index mode. So if you go to Image, choose the mode, notice it's going indexed color. We talked about GIFs, they only save the colors that you're using. They're indexing the colors, and not saving all of them. You need to convert this to an RGB mode in order to turn on creating frame animation. So with this one, I can click that. Now I can start building out my animation from here. I'll do this really quickly. So for GIF 1, just going to place on each of the images. You may have to resize most of these images since some of them are landscape. Alright, all 4 of them loaded up. I know I want, let's see, this one to be the first one, so flowers will be first. Y'all remember how to do this? What's the next step that I need to do? Create a new frame. New frame created.
Turn off.
Drop the opacity. For this one, since you're creating a tween animation, I'm going to drop the opacity of layer 1. Then next, what's next? Tween. Choose your tween button. And 5 frames is okay. We'll say okay. Make a new one. Select the next layer, drop your opacity, hit tween, and go from there. Select the next one. Drop the opacity, tween it out. And then I'm going to choose the first one again. We'll bring up the opacity to 100%. And we'll tween it out from there. Now that I've got my animation created, we're going to go back to Save for Web. In this case, make sure GIF is selected. Also, I'm going to bump up the dither just so it'll look a little bit better. When you hit Save, make sure you're only saving just the image. And you're saving it to that images folder. So we want to save over that GIF 1 that we created. When I do that, it's going to give me an error saying, hey, you sure you want to replace this file? Hit Replace. Now, when I try to open up my sample site 3 that I created, it's going to replace GIF 1 with the animated GIF. What did I not do? What, did y'all catch it? The timing on it. Got to change your timing to the seconds. No problem whatsoever. Go back in. Yep, and also need to loop it. So here's GIF 1. Since it's saved, we'll say update. You can go back in, change your timing, so I know I want this one to be 2 seconds, this keyframe to be 2 seconds, and also change your looping from once to have it loop forever. Resave it for web. Hit the HTML images only. Replace it. Haha, go ahead and save that. Now when I open up the HTML file, pause for 2 seconds, change this to the next one, pauses for 2 seconds, changes to the next one, and so on and so forth. Well, I didn't do the other frames, but you get the idea. You set up the looping for it, change out the same thing for the other 2 GIFs that you're going to create for this website.
So are they going to be the same, the GIFs?
No, the GIF 2 I think is going to be
Oh, okay.
like candy, and GIF 3 I think is toys. you're just looping through different ones for that one. For your main project, this is what's going to be due this time next week, next Thursday. You're going to create a dance website. So for your homework assignment, I asked you to learn just one simple dance move. I've got my camera set up, and we're going to record you whenever you're ready to do that. For this dance website, I want you to create your own website that is at least 1,050 pixels wide and no more than 3,000 pixels tall. That's a pretty tall website. For mine, I'm just kind of created a simple website. I'm still building it out. Mine's about 1,000 by 2,000 pixels tall in itself. I wanted to have at least 4 links to it. A learn more, contact us, contribute, and a homepage link within this one page. It needs to have the title, Learn to Dance, and having a section called About Us. And you can type in just some general dummy text inside of here. Design it out however you want it to be. Just one page. You don't have to do a full website to work from. Down at the very bottom, I want you to include at least 8 GIF images. And we're going to learn how to convert the videos to a GIF next week. This week, we're just going to record them, and I'm going to place them all on Moodle for you to work with. But when you develop your website, what I did was I just made some dummy placeholder images where I would put each of the GIFs inside of the website. So once the final website is developed and I slice it up, all I have to do is replace that image area with the animated GIF of everyone dancing dancing inside of here. Pretty cool? Repeating GIF from that. Also want you to have some sort of background image. Make it look really good, something with texture, something that it looks like a legitimate website, something you would want to go to show off. And make the website links appropriate. So if you're going to make a link to learn more, actually slice it up and change out the web link, the URL, to a learn more page from there as well.
On a slice, does it have to be horizontal or vertical?
Nope, it can be any particular way. So if I got my slice tool and you want a very vertical slice, you can slice it up. And so now this one is a very vertical type slice. Whatever dimension you want it to be, you can.
But I mean, you can't change the.
Oh no, you can't rotate it. You mean, yeah, it has to be horizontal and vertical, up and down from there. Good question. Any further questions from that? Alrighty, I'll turn it over to you and let y'all get started.